hold that thought, because I'm gonna now, like, how about we do like a just a couple second pause, and then we'll just go into it. And
we're not in it. We could be in it.
Well, sure, we can be in
it.
Okay.
Why are we practicing a conversation?
Because I'm
this is something that happens. What happened?
What was that? Nose, like I'm not putting.
Oh no, you're fine. That's you. Your uniqueness is coming through. It's all beautiful. Why censor it? That we were speaking at one point when you mentioned doing this interview about you mentioned all the things that you wanted to cover, and then I was like, wait a second. And then I noticed, like, I'm having practice conversations, and I'm like, why are you practicing conversations? What are you doing? Like, that's craziness. You have no idea what's coming up. But I think that that's also a good thing. Like, you're talking about how you forget about your uniqueness and what's going on inside of you and what you want to bring out. So in your nervousness, maybe your anxiety about having interviews or podcasts or whatever it is that you're coming up with the book and everything that you have going on, maybe do have interviews with yourself, do imagine yourself in those situations, and just listen to what you innately say versus try to come up with an answer. Like, if you just, whatever happens in your brain comes out of your own, just like you do your writing, whatever comes out is what comes out. You'll see some beautiful things inside you, just like you do when you write, but it's just verbal instead of written, which I think is beautiful. I'm so happy and excited for you. I just have to say, like, it's beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so happy and excited for me, because I'm like, yo, there's so many things that are wrong and awful in the world, but like, we don't fix them, or we don't even crack the surface of fixing the problem without just going balls to the wall, like different and like out there and weird.
And fixing ourselves.
Right. And so where I think that two things happened for me around publishing or deciding to publish meta work. The first thing was that last year, when I was just out of it, I was on disability, and I was just like, all right, I feel like I'm like a little amphibian crawling out of the sea, just learning how, because the loss of cognitive function, or the ability to think clearly and express myself clearly, I mean, like, that's just, when I'm under so much stress and going through the housing crisis last year, I was like, man, like, this is just what happens. How do I get back to me? And that's where I looked at what at the time was still the memoir manuscript. And I couldn't even like really grok like sentence by sentence, line by line, but I saw scenes and I was thinking in images. And as I locked onto that and read my then memoir, I was like, no, this is what it is. This is like what it's like to be in a disordered or trauma filled, or to be in a mind that's not rational and that's not whole. That's what I want to do through my creative work. I want to show that and not come at it or not show it from this like point of exceptionalism, like, oh, I'm trying to get back to a rational mind. Because like, look, I don't know the difference, like growing up with mental health problems, like the disorder was my normal, and having whatever in my mind, it's kind of like, again, with the shaming thing, right? Like if this is wrong, if this is bad, you need to change. I'm like, no, this is my mind. Like, this is my unique imprint and interaction with the world. So I was looking at the manuscript and just letting it act as a mirror, and in that mirror image, see myself walking back out of the darkness step by step, where it was like, cool, like I have this scene written, I can see this scene and I know exactly that scene as it happened. I created that image again. Cool. That's what it is in the manuscript. And it just clicked when I was like, no, this is autofiction. This is that autobiographical fiction, that interplay of subject, object, reader, writer, like who's telling the story? Whose story is this? But like, that's relevant because if I was like, if this story is for the reader, well then shoot, I would have teased out more narrative, teased out more structure, teased out more details to make it a memoir, to make it a commentary on mental health. And I'm like, that's not what I wanted to do. The story is for me. This story is my story. So I, as the writer, I'm calling the shots and I'm calling it done. In the process, in like a creative healing process and using creative expression to heal, it definitely functioned. But then as a thing in itself, when I read it or I have other people read it, the feedback that I get is like, this is alive. And that's what I wanted to do. And that is what makes it different, or that's my gift to the world. That's like, okay, like, I'm not going to write something that's similar. I'm not writing something for you guys. I'm writing something that's different and new. And because I don't want the same end result, like, cool, just another story about some chick with bipolar disorder, or and I don't even like center, I don't even front with the narrative of bipolar disorder. I'm just like, drop you in, like, it's awful working. I get up and I leave, and like I can't work consistently, and like my mind is just this like fractured like ball of marbles where like things are just rolling around, and I'm like, oh, association, memory, like visual sensory impression, like what, visceral, what, you know? And that's what I wanted to represent. But that's where, in considering or talking about creative authority and being original, that's where I am completely inspired and like bumping next to you, because like you have to learn then when your art or what you're offering is ready, you know? And like, for me, it was like a very somatic experience. I had finished the manuscript apart from needing some line edits, but like in assembling the images and assembling like the order of chapters, I finished it while I was in the desert. And I just had this like electricity shoot through me. And that's when I was like, yep, winner, winner, chicken dinner. Let's press play and like move this, or let's start to think about what it would be like. Because I wasn't in the frame of mind to actually be able to produce a book at that time. But I was like, yeah, this is it, you know? Can you talk a little bit about your process and your feedback loop, that somatic response that you have with yourself? Because your work just kind of like, it just keeps coming, and I'm just like, man, this chick has like
I have to like stop, and I can't keep up with it because I blow my arms out. And then I'm like, I have to keep going, but I can't even physically draw right now. I have to like not. I turn my brain off. I turn my brain off completely, and I just let it happen. Depending on what style, I have a few different styles. So depending on which style I'm working on at the time, like my standard Ezerd model robot, my SEM robot,
yeah,
that's like my character that just gets recognized, and a lot of people collect that. You know, that I had a handful of robots that I would always draw, and that's the one that everybody was like aiming towards, and that's the one that was feeling most like me anyway. So I was like, okay, it's an alien inside of a robot, and it's like in this like amorphous color field situation, like everything is like, huh? It's all energy. And so that one got picked up, that one gets recognized. So that's the one I kind of like, this is the one people resonate with, this is the one that represents me anyway, so this is the one I'm going to flow with. And so when I'm working on those pieces, that's automatic. I've literally drawn millions of those at this point. You know, they change, their outfits change a little here and there, but like it's the same character over and over and over. And then it's like the background will change based on the color flow. You've got my atom flow that I do, you got the wavelengths frequency situation, you've got, you know, there's a few little things that I have going. They're EFOs or EAP or EAPs, UFOs as an Ezerdian instead of unidentified, and instead of unidentified aerial phenomenon, it's Ezerdian aerial phenomenon. So I have a few things along those that are like the little icon type of things that happen. But I also have my being ships. I call them being ships. You see the ones up here.
Yeah.
And that is straight up. That is straight up. I make the backgrounds for everything the same. I mix a certain, it changes, but I'll do like a group of paper or canvases or panels or whatever, all at the same time, whatever I have for, like if I'm doing a show, I'll do that certain number of panels or canvases, and I'll mix the background inks to the same equivalent thing. They'll all come from that same batch of water and ink mixture. So they're all coming from the same energy. They're all coming from the same place. And then it all mixes individually on a canvas. I only do cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And I don't mix them at all. They mix themselves on the canvas. They make their own place. They make their own space. And then I seal that off. And then for the being shifts, it sometimes happens for the SEM stuff, but it's more like I know what's going to happen, even though I don't know what's going to happen, because I've got the handful of things that happen in those types of things. But the being ships are full on, like I look at the background and then I start seeing things moving. I start seeing things flow in and out. I see things interacting with each other, interacting with me, flowing. I can hear things. And then sometimes I even end up where I'm in a setting that's not where I'm at. And I can hear the dynamics of the room I'm in are different than the dynamics of the room that I'm in. I can hear stuff happening elsewhere. And then everything on the canvas disappears. It all goes away. And then a single shape will show up. It's usually like circle, oval type of shape. And then it stays there. And then I turn away or I go do something else and I come back to it. And if that's the shape is still there, if that's still showing to me, that's where I start. And as soon as I start drawing that, it starts flowing and I just follow the line. I have zero thought that's put into it. I just trust the line completely and I just draw. And sometimes it goes like way too fast. I'm like, you have to slow down, Ezerd, slow down, you know? And then sometimes like it's going too slow, especially if I'm working on paper, because you got the bleed factor. I'll be like, all right, you got to speed it up a little bit. Let's go a little faster. And it just comes out. It just comes from somewhere. I just trust it completely because that's
amazing.
Thank you. Absolutely I give myself over to it and I trust what's happening. And then I'll stop. It'll stop. And sometimes it'll tell me like, turn it. And then sometimes it's like, you know, now we start over here. Like, it totally guides me. Like, it's like I'm the little whatever mechanism inside of the Etch-a-Sketch and someone else is doing the little buttons. Yeah. But I give over fully. And then at some point, it leaves me alone to go finish it off. And I'll know exactly like this line needs to be thicker. This line needs to be this, or like I need to put these circles right here, 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 and here. I need to do these little dashes here. And then I'll know if I paint it in, which a lot of it I don't paint in anymore. Sometimes I do, but not a lot of the time. And I know exactly what color it is because I've seen it. I know it. It's like I'm drawing this thing that's in front of me that I see. I see it like tiny bit by tiny bit, but by the time it's all together, I know exactly what it is. Sometimes I don't know until then I turn it and I'm like, oh yeah, you know, but it just happens.
And so you see it, just so I'm understanding correctly, you see it on the actual canvas. You don't see it in like the third eye or anywhere like internally. It's externally, and you're like the transmitter, really.
It's kind of like an in-between kind of thing. Yeah. It's a different space. It's really interesting.
So interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
I've had points where like I'm filming it because I don't really, you know, when I'm in the process, like it could be like 5 minutes and I've done a ton, or it could be like 5 hours and it's not a lot. Like, and I don't have I have zero sense of time when I'm in the middle of it. And then I do just get to a point where my arm just doesn't work anymore. My arm just is done. Yeah. So I have to stop no matter what. And there are times where like, what am I doing? Like, what is this? And I'll turn it. And then I'll be like, how did I get that perspective? How did I get that? Because if you sat me down and said, draw this highly perspectivized situation, I'd be like, yeah, no, that's maths. I don't have that. Nope. good luck. I'm going to go draw more flat stuff for you. I'm going to draw some flat stuff. That's what I do. You know? And then,
Lines. I'll do the lines.
I'm just going to draw some flat stuff for you. And then, but sometimes like the perspectives that come through, like my brain is like, how did that happen? And then my brain answers back, because I'm like, I don't understand math. How did I do this? And then my brain answers back like, you don't understand earth math. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's this place elsewhere that's coming through, and I just trust it completely. It's there for a reason. It's come from somewhere, and that's what happens. Your camera tilted. Oh, now it's back the other way. Weird. And the ear is gone.
Oh my God, I needed to unmute myself. Thank you. I just, like I was saying, nothing works consistently here in New Orleans, right? It just dropped. It might be a little chop suey video, but
you're also now on the tall screen versus the side screen, which it was doing it flipped. Maybe your phone. There you go. Got it.
Okay.
So that'll be a fun edit. Or we'll keep it in, because that's beautiful how it happens. That's how it's supposed to happen. We should just keep it.
I agree. You know, you're starting to talk about earth mass, and I'm just like, yeah. And then it was like, no, you know. So
you're like, don't talk about earth mass.
Right, like, oh, that's you, right? And being an original thinker, I'd be like, okay, whatever, universe, that's cool. Like, I got you, because like, you know, with my cosmology, and I think why we both get on so well is that like, I am down the line of thought where everything has sentience. All layers, all dimensions have sentience. There are many, many layers of energy, and pansentience, cool. You know, like that rock's got something to say, cool. And I think it freaks a lot of people out, but you know, like, I'm not about to sit here and practice all these, like, you know, have all these really deep and meaningful rituals that I've learned from shamans, or I've learned from like also intuitively, and having experiences, peak experiences, out of body experiences. I'm like, man, there's so much more than what meets the eye. And like, look, if it terrifies people to know that there's sentience or there's energetic awareness out there, all right, well, that's just something, put it on the list of shit I need to do to break down, right? So like,
it's purposefully done that way.
Right.
So very purposefully done that way.
I love, you know, like, I don't know that, I'm sure you've talked about your work in terms of character, but maybe it just hadn't landed before, because I don't know that I've actually like grokked you saying like, oh, I'm painting the characters. And I'm like, oh, which to me says like that character's got a story, that character's got a life, that character's got something to say. But like, I kind of knew that, but like being the transmitter or being the channel, or wherever this stuff is coming from, and for whatever reason the stuff has chosen you and you're just flowing with it, is really beautiful and really original. And in the respect that like, it doesn't sound like you, I mean, look, there are other artists out there who are just like, who are painting it because they align with the idea that this is what they're meant to do. I mean, it sounds like you come to peace with like, I don't have a choice. It's just going to come through me, and this is what happens, right? Like,
can't take a day off even. Like, I'm like, I need to rest. I need to like rest my arm. I need to just rest. And then like, I like 15 minutes in, I'm like, what am I doing now? I got to do some stuff. Like,
right. It's so interesting that you say that. Well, I had grabbed this book while you were talking, From India to the Planet Mars. And this is like public domain stuff, but this is the story, or it's written from the perspective of a professor from the clinician. So already we've got that power structure upheld. But this woman was a medium in 19th century France, and she did automatic writing. She did trance, but she also had conversations with whatever these beings or things were, and started talking with them in the way that you were just like, oh, we're doing this, and we're like, oh, turn it like this, you know, like, oh, like, yeah, she talked about that. But of course, in the time, historical, and cultural context, they called this mental illness, and they, well, it was poo-pooed, let's just say that. And I think that now being able to actually embrace this incredible channel of communication and allow it to be what it wants to be in art, but also in this conversation across dimensions, across energetic realms, you know, like, I think it's so beautiful and so original because it's so pure. You know, it's not like, I mean, look, I love folks at these like art markets left and right selling their stuff, you know, but there's just a difference between selling original work and stuff that you can just like press copy and like grab from the copy shop, or like, oh, you know, go to like some craft store, get the materials, and like you have this idea of what you're gonna make, and then you make it, you know. Like, originality is a harder sell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember doing, go ahead.
The whole art world is like so chock full of appropriation as well. And it gets to be such a fine line in that appropriation. Yay, nay, appropriation line.
Yeah.
Is this a lot? Is it not? And it's really difficult to watch. Seemingly everyone succumbing to the, oh yeah, that's high praise for you, you know, when like people who are doing thoroughly original things are shunned and pushed away because it's not something that's automatically feeding into what you've already been programmed with. But all of that is so thoroughly manipulated from in utero. Like, you're already programmed in so many layers. And all these things are things that I've been trying to say through the characters and trying to bring a oneness to people through all my characters. That's how the Adopt a Robot program started. I have a series of paintings. I know you're familiar, but for those watching who aren't familiar, I have a series of paintings, 4x4 portraits of robots. And they come with a little profile that tells you about them. Because, you know, if you're going to adopt a robot, take it into your home, have it be your new pal, like, you have to know what you're getting into, right? So it's got a little personality to it. It's a little info sheet. And
I love
just watching people react to these personalities. They're just random little tidbits, like random stuff that could be from anyone, anywhere. And them totally like feeling that robot, like, oh, this is like me. Oh, this one's like you. Oh, this one's like Susan. Oh, this one's like, and then I've actually had people look at me like, do you know Sarah? No, this is the oneness. This is the coming together, realizing that we are all just the same, you know, but everyone is so locked into their layers of trauma, and everyone is so locked into the us versus them, the me versus other, and the various layers of dominance and deconstruction that have been implanted within our system, that all and so that we were trying to speak of are pushed away because it's not acceptable. It's not allowed. You're breaking the system. Don't break the system. The system's in place for a reason.
Man, I'm here to break the system, but you know, like, it takes not just like a bunch of confidence, but also an ability to connect directly to the audience or your consumer to create that groundswell. And so for me, like, look, like, I'm the first to say, like, confidence has not been one of my gifts, you know, like, I've had to, and in doing something different, whenever my writing has always been different, whether, you know, I'm trying out different forms, or I'm just writing about, you know, I started writing a lot about peak experiences, and like, I was in, or just like being out of body, out of mind, just, you know, supernatural experiences. And I remember being in a memoir group many, many years ago, and someone was just like, are you making this up? And I'm like, no, I'm writing what I see and how I experience. And so every time there was that undercut, or, oh, okay, like maybe you should try the scene a different way, or maybe it should be like this. And I'm like, but no, but this is how it wants to be, you know? And I tended to just be like, okay, whatever, maybe there's something wrong with me, or maybe I just need to learn more. Maybe I just needed to, like, I don't know, do something else with the writing. But which is why this, when meta work was just like, yep, this is it, we're doing this. I was like that embodied, like, yeah, you know, felt like it started to fill the vacancy, or where the lack of confidence was. Like the work itself was just like, no, nope. Oh, someone said like you needed to add like another chapter and build out the scene. Nope, it's going to be like, you know, it's not to say I'm not going to take critique, but it really has to come from somewhere that serves the work, but also my vision. And if like you talk to me for 5 minutes, like I always, like if I sent out, when I was sending out the manuscript for readers reviews and whatever, I was always prefacing, look, this is written in a measure of verisimilitude. Like I'm creating the world for you to drop into. Like, don't expect to see the world that you want to see. I'm showing you the world that I've lived in and how I pieced it together. And so that got like literally like two kinds of responses parted right down the middle. Fuck yeah, I get it. This is punk. I'm with you, you know, or I don't get it. You need to go back to the drawing board. And it was just like night and day. But what I love about, I mean, I could listen to these stories about your process for hours, because I resonate so much with being in flow. And what I think is really interesting is that meta work as autofiction started to take on a life of its own. And I had to trust that vision to then say, okay, creative authority, like, okay, like I'm doing it, like I'm putting the thing out, you know? And it's very different, or writing in this autofiction is different from my flash or some of my sci-fi and speculative, because like in those worlds, I still tend to put a lot of onus on the reader, where like I still use a lot of references that you're only going to know if like you're an English speaking person who lives in North America, or I put on a lot of reference, or just like, you know, like I expect you to do a lot of the work rather than building out a fully fantastical world. Like I'm like, no, this is like an X-File kind of version of like, could be real, could not be real. If you think I'm talking about or referring to something in the real world, I probably am, but this is my super secret dig at it. You know, like I have this one short story, flash fiction, that I did. And I legit said, you know, the main character is a woman working at a cubicle in the global north. And we know that the global north is essentially like America, right? Like the dominant country power holder, Western weird narrative, the white, educated, industrialized, rich.
Force holder, not power holder. Force holder.
Yes, forceful. Okay. And I wrote it right after watching that episode where they stormed the Capitol back in January. And I was just like, yeah, I don't like, this feels awful. This is like, it was such like a surreal experience. I'll never forget. I was in Brooklyn and I was going to pick up my laundry, and like I looked up and they started to stream like some of the images of the Capitol being stormed, and like this, you know, brown woman was taking my cash, and like some brown dude was on like the sewing machine behind me, and then like some white people came in, brought their laundry in, and like nobody like flinched, and I was kind of like, everybody's doing the same thing. Like, is this real? Is this real? This isn't real. This isn't really real, right? And then obviously it was real, right? And I read a few days after that, I read something in a Latin publication that was just like, look, we have political upheaval and turmoil in Latin and South American countries all the time. America, welcome to the party. Like, this is just like another day, you know, in one of our countries, right? And I was like, oh. So meanwhile, it was like a cultural thing, like, oh my God, like democracy is breaking. Yes, democracy is breaking down. And like, yes, there are boundaries that are being crossed and not upheld. And like, there's a whole lot of dumpster fire going on. But I was like, but this whole, like, is it real or did it happen? Like, is like, what's going on here? So I did this short story where the woman works at a cubicle in the global north cataloging information, and she meets online some dude who lives in the global south, and the global south basically refers to like Latin and South America. I like, that's what I refer, or that's where I get on with board with the definition. I've heard it referred to anywhere outside of like the US and Europe. I don't know about that, but when I was writing the story, I was really trying to work out the surreality of like, look, like, you know, 45 and his regime incited this riot, upheld it, like got caught and was just like, oh, I had nothing to do with it. Super garbage, right? Meanwhile, people are literally like, this isn't even real. This isn't even happening. And meanwhile, across the country, like, I was like, you know, think of all the stories where someone's belief or disbelief totally took that person out of the equation. And so I wrote this flash story where it was really a story about power. And this girl falls in love with someone she meets on the internet, and she needs to go to the global south to meet him because he's suddenly not responding, right? And then when she gets there, she realizes like, there's nobody in the global south because the global north had built power plants and basically took all the people from the global south, put them in the incinerator power plants, and were like powering the rest of the world with bodies of like these people. Super like intense, gross, weird, right? But here, but the idea was that like, I have to work out this whole like fucking conundrum that like somebody over here presses a button, erases my fucking existence, and like power structures that I'm like enmeshed upon and like enmeshed with, and can't even discern what's real from truth because I'm so in that power imbalance. Like, that is just something I needed, that's like part of being alive at this moment in time. And I needed to work that out through some flash fiction, just having this character where I could be like, oh my God, I'm suddenly dying now. The story was initially titled Gaslighting because the lighting powered all the gas lamps in the global north, but might be too strong of a play on words. I mean, look, I like disintegrate countries. Maybe I'll, you know, revise that. But that was so different from the point of this story, writing meta work, where I was just like, this is something that I just need to like flow out and work through and be original with and be disruptive to every other type of memoir-esque or even speculative memoir work out there. Like, I know, no, like this is autofiction. This is blurring the boundary between reality and fiction, but this is my story and this is truth. And this is how it wants to flow out. And there was nothing else that I could have done or touched or changed in that book because it didn't want to. It got to a point where it was like, stop, no, we're done, put it out. And it was like, okay, right? But from like a psychological standpoint and me needing to like work out that other issue of power, like doing it in the flash, I feel like I could write 100 different versions of that flash story. Probably some
flash stories that plays out in 100 different ways every single day, depending on what scale.
Oh, right.
That's an everyday, everywhere you look. It's just that we've learned to overlook it. We're comfortable enough that we're allowed to overlook it in this place. A lot of countries, a lot of people, they don't have that option.
So, and just following that or advancing that train of thought, I was going with needing to get it out to people directly, you know? So like, you're so good at connecting with your audience and you're so good at that part, you know, like, I think that like part of being an original artist also means having to advocate for yourself on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Because either you sell out, you fold, like maybe you apply your talent to like something else, or you just don't do it. And I'm like, I could not be in conversation with whatever these energies are, whatever this creative impulse is. Because at the end of the day, like, while it is a lot of work to write, to continually be in this like dreamscape and like pulling threads out, weaving stories, there is something that is inherently rejuvenating about it. And right? Yeah. Yeah.
If I don't do it, and if I don't do it for a certain length of time, I'm like completely unrecognizable. I'm so unrecognizable, you won't see me because I will not be seen. I'm done. I will no longer be, you know. It's breath. It's beat, it's breath. That's what it is. And if you are tuned into it and you don't have it, it's someone, I was having this discussion about this energy flow with, I think that you met Antoine, my friend Antoine.
Oh, robots.
Yes.
He did a robot book, right?
Yeah. So Antoine and I were having a similar conversation about energy and where this stuff is coming from, and he called it my source code. So like, oh, okay, I'm gonna start using that, I guess. My source code. So if you're plugged in, if you're in that wavelength and frequency, and then you're suddenly deprived of it, because like you're a bag of chemicals, you're a bag of energy. Like if suddenly you don't have that, your body is not nourished in the same way that you need, that you're accustomed to. You might morph into something else. I morph into some amoeba-like thing that just slugs around the house going, why?
What do I morph into? I morph into an alligator. Alligators are so on my mind because Louisiana, like some dude just got eaten by an alligator after Hurricane Ida. That's what I would do. I just turn into this mean, nasty, like, yeah, when I'm not plugged into my source code. But it, and energetics are like a really funny thing. They're a really funny thing. Like,
like, we're like, you're doing the
no, both.
No,
like,
but like
all
of it. It's all of it. All of it.
Sometimes it's stuff just gets so ridiculous that you just have to laugh because why? Because like, what else, right? But I love it. You started in a different conversation. You had started to talk about not being able to flow if someone interrupts you, and because like they're interrupting the energetics.
The energy is different. As soon as anybody steps in, as soon as anything, then it's just like, wait, it feels different now. It looks different. It sounds different. It's different. It's like, I get really, kind of nervous about, I have like anxiety about having people see things that aren't finished, because a lot of the time someone's like, I want it. That's mine. Claim it. I claim that one. Right. And so then like, I'm like, it's not done yet. It's not done yet. They're like, oh, no. We're like, I want that one. Whatever you do to it, however that's mine. And then I'm just like frozen. I have a handful of commissions right now, and I have a handful of work for a gallery right now that I'm just like, all right. Because now it's different, there's like the different energy that's been attached to it now. There's the expectation that they have, they don't even really have like a fleshed out expectation. They just have like, oh, I'm going to get that. And to me, it's like, they're seeing me in some certain way, and then they're seeing that in some certain way. And so I'm like trying to analyze, like, what are they thinking? And then I have to like cut all that through and then just keep going in that authentic way. But it's already altered so much because all these layers, just like you were talking about the unseen layers before, it's unseen layers. I don't know whether it keeps recording when it goes. Does it keep recording when it flashes out like that? We'll see. We will see.
That's you're like being unprepared, just being like, hey, let's just do this, and like,
we're doing
whatever
this.
happens.
I love that. That's how it should be. That's how life should be. Like look at how much energy and worry and anxiety and frustration is played out in the planning and figuring it out.
And that's exactly why I was like, no, we're doing this vlog thing. I'm not planning. Like, I have a blog that I wanted to write, but the point being, above and beyond all of that was like, I could plan out and write a blog, or I could actually live the practice. The name of my blog, I'm starting to call it The Practice, because it's about the reflection, the creative expression, but it's also about ideas. And so I wanted to write, I don't know, something about exceptional experiences and ideas. And then I was like, you know what, screw that. Like, let me just call Ezerd. Like, let's just do this. Like, because
is it practice or is it doing? It's the doing.
Yeah.
And then when you were saying, hey, we should do a volume, I'm like, all right, log me in. Where do I go? And then you're like, we'll do it on Sunday. And I was like, shit, my brain's going to be stuck on this until Sunday. And then so I'm like, all right. Like I'm not a plan ahead type of, I don't flow like that. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I'm here today. Now what? And then I look at the list of stuff that I had from yesterday that I didn't finish. I'm like, all right, let's add to that and see what happens today. But I'm not so great at like, I don't have a tomorrow plan. I don't have a 3-year plan. I don't have a 5-year plan. I have a maybe I'll be here tomorrow plan.
That's cool. I mean, like,
it's wild when I post like, I'm doing Friday night art dorks. If I'm here on Friday, people don't understand that when I say that, or when I leave something or I'm like, well, I'll see you if I'm alive, I'll be there.
Which makes it so much more awesome, because you've accumulated so much presence and showing up. Because then when you look at the stuff that you have done, it's like, whoa, there's a whole trail behind you of like consistently showing up for the pop-up shops and consistently showing up for gallery shows and consistently posting. Like, I suck at posting every day. I'm like, and when there's a woman that I'm working with who's like, you should, connect more with your audience and try doing some value posts. I'm like, okay, so I'll post about what I made for breakfast and like something I was reading. And she's like, no. Like, I don't know.
It's
not that I show up. I'm just like, I want to be in that weird place where I'm thinking about like, oh, the global north, and like, here's a character who's going to be melted into like, the fuel to power the gas lights for, like, there's something more valuable there to me in passing time in the creative experience and expression. But yeah, that's just like the underbelly of like, everybody wants to be an artist until like y'all realize how hard it is, and like how much trust you need and how much you actually need to surrender. You want to do the thing originally, like, cool, good luck with that. Bye, life. Bye. Like, any semblance of like normalcy or just structure, kind of just like,
I have the conversation over and over with people. If that's what you want, you have to do the work. You just have to, and you just have to do it. No one else is going to do it for you. No one else is going to set it in front of you. No one else, I mean, unless you are born into like a family or some kind of elevated position where everything is just handed to you, which is not everyone's situation. Let's face it, that's a rare thing, that you're born into a situation where everything is just handed to you. And no, you have to do the work. You have to do it.
Yeah, you have to
have, and you were talking about confidence earlier. Have confidence. Just do it. When you do it, you're doing it. You don't have to think about whether or not you're confident in it. You're doing it. So there's no point in putting that extra layer of anything in there. You just do. Stop thinking.
Yeah.
Thinking is a killer. Thinking stops everyone from doing what they want to do, because we're trained from the very beginning to just accept programming, just accept what you're given, just accept this, and not to create. You're taught to consume. This is what you're supposed to know. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to know. This is what you're supposed to do. And it has nothing to do with any kind of alignment within yourself. And so when you put all that down and you just do, and you just do authentically, you're just present and authentic and do, that's when it all starts to unfold. That's when it all starts to blossom.
Yeah, thank you. I think that there's a slight difference between writing and visual art, because like visual art can be like a piece and you can just like throw it up on the wall and it's there. But like, if you're not published or you don't have like that outlet, then like who's even reading? Like, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, you know? So I think part of too, the lack of confidence came from so many rejections and nope, this doesn't fit in this journal. This doesn't fit in this book. This doesn't fit. And like, cool. Like I it's like a double-edged sword. Like, I get it. Like on one hand, you want the validation to say like, oh, I'm a writer and here's where you can read my stuff. And then the other part of that is, oh, I'm a writer, read my stuff on my blog, maybe kind of.
Artists have that too, though. Artists have this thing. It's who's accepted into what gallery, who's accepted into what platform, who's accepted into, so it's different, but it's also the same. And just because someone looks at something doesn't mean that they've seen it either. Just because they go to your website and look at your blog doesn't mean that they've read it. Just because they see my thing on a wall doesn't mean that they've seen it, or that they see it. If they're scrolling through Instagram or whatever they're doing, what are they really taking in? It's about you putting it out there and not worrying about, let everyone else figure out what they think about it. You have to live through your truth and through what you want to do. So
yeah, and that makes the addition or the idea of just being a channel so prescient. I mean, I like to think, but I like to think because I want to like deconstruct what I'm thinking and break it down, like little activators or little consciousness bombs. I mean, like if I have one more person read my stuff and be like, dude, what? I'm like, you got it. You know, like that's the freaking point. Like, I don't want you to read it, put it down, and be like, okay, cool, next. I want you to be like, I don't know what that was. And like, there were some things that like, I think she was like talking to me, but she wasn't, because like I was reading a book. Like it's very alive. When I released 713 20 years ago, my first work of autofiction, I was definitely not prepared to defend the work because I was still looking for that approval and inclusion, but wanting to be different. And like, you know, the great part about getting older is you realize like they don't always mix. They don't. And so finally I was like, I'm tired of working on other people's stuff. I want to just do me. And now I'm sure about me. But part of that came from learning how to navigate my mind, and then also navigating that, being that channel and being able to connect with that embodied sense of trust, that I was like, okay, this is what the work is, and it's not just like some garble, because I definitely have a lot of garble also, you know, like valuable. It's part of the process. But then what actually goes out there to say, okay, this is it, final answer, done, we're not touching this one anymore. But I've got like a bajillion other things that I'm messing with. I mean, like I've even got writing on my floor because I just covered the floor in cardboard. It's like you just keep going, you just keep going, you just keep going. Like it is. But being that channel, and that's like, for me, being, you know, grounding, is that like, am I dating myself when I say I grounded in LLC? That's not even right. So look, I bought the license of business stuff. Planet Dust is an LLC. I'm a micro publisher. I can produce content, and it's hella like Demetrius and Locke in the System, you know, like if you read Ender's Game, with those two little kids take on the assumed names of these like philosophers, and they're just like publishing stuff on the web with like proto web, and society was like, wow, this is great, not knowing that like it was little kids who were dropping these wisdom bombs, right? I kind of feel like I align with that vision, or that I so much, because once you can like drop, as a writer, drop these little idea seeds into the collective thought body, and you can drop it out there and actually connect with people. And I'm not even going the route of like doing a reading, because like that's way too mainstream and traditional for me. Like I want y'all to show up to my workshops. I want to mess with your head. And then you thought it was cool, buy the book as a souvenir. Like you were in my world, now you left. That's what you get to take from it, right? Or just like having really interesting conversations, or just like random stuff. Like I'm sure when I get a chance, I'll buy a box of books and just drop some all over New Orleans or wherever I happen to be, you know, and letting that chance, that randomness, for me, that's also part of the process, and trusting that that's how I would have to go, rather than sit back and wait for other people to be the gatekeeper to allow me entry into this publishing world. there's some really interesting, like, you know, intellectual hierarchy that happens with this culture making, when like mainstream channels, independent channels, people who are standing on the corner, you know, reading their poetry or selling their, like, oh my God, I almost said cassettes. They don't, like, this is like 1980s New York, like somebody selling their CD or some shit, have a you know, like a suitcase on the street corner in the Bronx. I mean, I bought plenty of you know, Dougie Fresh mixtapes like that, but like, again, dating myself.
I said videotape the other day on something, and somebody was like, "Wait, how old are you?" I was like, "I said videotape." Oh,
Oh,
oh.
but like, look, like there's something about hard copy that like does the original artist, original thinker good. Because like, here's the thing, like it's a thing that I can make and I can give to you.
And even a hard copy is so easily disintegrating. Just, you know, it's got to get into the mind. It's got to get into the mind. That's what it is. And you have to trust in the energy brought it through you to be brought out, and it will find the people it needs to find, whether they have a copy of your book, whether they hear about the book. You know, it's all about the flow. You've brought it in, it's going to flow where it needs to flow, and you don't have control over that. You have like,
Yeah,
you have this much control over that, you know, but you just have to birth it. That's the point.
yeah, that's exactly it. Like, that's, you know, so almost like the meta conversation about like whether someone is an artist or not, or like whether you feel like you're an artist. Because I feel like we've also had this conversation. I've known you long enough. We've had that conversation of like, what am I even doing? You know, like, am I like this thing, right? That all kinds of kind of goes away because you surrender to the process of the work. And like, this is your role in this lifetime, where like, okay, like pulling the stuff out of the ether. I'm making worlds out of my words, and like you're making worlds out of your images, but like they're all some kind of currency, right? To plug into like, you know, an energy kind of themed word, like they're all currency that make that connection for someone. And I agree, you know, like for me, your work has such a Neptunian vibe to it. Like it radiates cosmic love. There are certainly days when I have my little standard Ezerd models in the kitchen, you know, the tiny ones. And I'm like, they might be talking to me. They might be saying something. And all they say is love. And in my work too, you know, like in meta work, I talk about rehashing the idea of work and what it means to work. I mean, look, my dad was a bull and he basically worked himself to death. And my mom has spent a lot of time not working because she couldn't. And, you know, like my experience of being on disability, of being like, look, I can't, like, I get my job, my occupation is, you know, I'm an editor, I'm a writer. Like if I can't do it, like I can't work, right? So I wanted to subvert that meaning by putting it into the text, putting it into the story, where like the text is kind of self-aware, and I'm writing, or the narrator is telling you the story within meta work, but like working out these really intense situations and these really dynamic, divergent concepts of work that I inherited from my dad and from my mom. And then there was me in between going like, shit, like I can't do it. Am I just like my mom? And then I grew up with my dad being like, you're gonna be just like your mom if you don't fucking work. And I'm like, well, how about I can't work and I don't, like, either way. I hope that what comes through is love, because like either way, these were just situations that I grew up with that formed my thoughts that were garbage, and I needed to break through from them to flip the vibe, you know, to turn the energy higher, because like they were just, you know, the situational, you know, details are hard to read. But then I come out of it with a lot of love. And that's also something that, again, for the people who got my work and the reviewers who are just like, wow, that was kind of brutal, but I feel the love for your parents. I'm like, yeah, it's there, you know, like it is there as like the cherry on top of flowing all of this through me. You know, it's definitely there. Are all original creators, you know, steeped in love? I don't know, but I think that if you're like an original and you're really listening to that voice, like you have to be plugged into something. And like, I just hope it's love.
I agree. I hope I don't like the word hope. I have trouble with hope. I have trouble with wishes, and I have trouble with promise.
Hmm.
May it be love. It must be
May it
love.
be love.
May it be
Yeah.
love.
I
Hope.
love that. You know, like I love that. May it be love.
I grew up in a lot of difficult situations. I've been through a lot of trauma, tons of trauma.
Garbage, right? Like say, like,
I'm the way I am because of the stuff that, you know, the way that I handled everything that I've been through and the things that I've seen. And I was surrounded by people through a large chunk of my life. Hope and wishes. I hope, I hope, I hope, I wish, I wish, I wish. I hope, I hope, I hope, I wish, I wish, I wish. That's as far as it would go.
yeah.
There was no next level. There was no next step. There was no next push. There was no energy behind it other than hope, I wish, I hope, I wish. So hope and wish, and also the promise. Hope and wish was nothing. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. You have to move forward. You have to move the energy forward. You have to make it into something. And also promise, like if you say something, that's what it should be. Don't put extra fluff on it. Don't like make it all fancy, but I promise. That's some bullshit. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
If you say it, you do it, you know.
Yeah.
Don't convince me you're gonna keep to your word. Keep your word. You know that. So hope, wish, and promise. I don't like. I have difficulty with those words. So may it be love. Love is where I flow from. So
I love that too, because I feel like that is exactly why I didn't do memoir. Because memoir is like hoping and wishing. Shit was different, but you know what? I didn't know any different. It was what it was. Like, here's the reflection. Here's what it looked like. Here's what it's like to be in my mind. Good luck with that. And it's all love. May we always return to love.
Flow through, and flow to, and all of it, love. Just may it be love. Yeah.
Well, that feels like a really great place to press stop on the recording. Me and my geese. Like, what? Do you want to keep going? I
got until I'm dead. What are you doing?
Let me like.
I'm plugged in until the grid stops or until I'm dead. Oh, loves to you, Anastasia. Are you there? Is this where I just talk about my? I just talk on my own now. Am I just talking on my own now? I see you now. I see you. You come back. You came right back. What's that? You were like, I'm out. And then you're back.
That was just a test.
What is that? I got you. Oh,
but hang on. You were like, shoot, I was perseverating about this, thinking, and now you're like, let's not stop. Let's keep going. What else? Like,
no, wherever you want to go, it's beautiful. Wherever you want to end, that's beautiful. I just want you to be happy and secure with what you have. And yeah, this happened. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and it was just so like unscripted, like one take wonder, like
we're not doing it again.
You want to do it again? I mean,
that was practice run, wasn't it?
That was practice. No, but like that's the point. That's where the energy is, like putting some of this stuff out there like this, just to like, you know, inspire, connect, drop love bombs that blow up some of this old energy, calcified bullshit that like continue to allow people or continue to inhibit people from connecting to whatever this flow. Y'all are all originals out there watching this. You, me, like we're all originals. It's just like some of us might be, you know, a little more front and centered in the whole like fuck all that other stuff, original or die.
Yeah, and
right now in this lifetime,
have to keep that line so that others have that. We'll use the word confidence. Just forget confidence. Just do.
Like, what is,
Just
like,
do. You know what's
yeah.
in you. Just do. Don't do harm. No harm. As long as you're not harming, just do.
Do no harm. You know what, like, okay, so maybe if we take out the word confidence, like part of what I like about using words like confidence or mental illness or bipolar disorder is that they're kind of asshole words. Like they just evoke so much garbage, and like, so we just flip the script on it. So like another way to talk about that lack
Words are power.
yeah, and it's a power. And so like by using them, I'm definitely acknowledging the destruction that they have brought, and also the disempowered narratives that they are associated with. So on the other side, like, of feeling a lack of confidence, another way to describe that was I didn't feel whole and full in myself. So
Worthy.
now
There's shame, worth, shame, all of that. It all connects. It's all lessenings.
Yeah. And now I feel ginormous. And so like, obviously, because now I'm like showing up in ways that like I couldn't before, honoring that, but then also just being like, yeah, okay, this is my job to just, show up and just use a lot of messy words and a lot of like things that are going to break up the older narratives.
You just have to put it out there. You have to shine the light, put the energy out there, put the love out there, and it's going to ripple where it wants to ripple. And those ripples are going to hit other people's ripples, and it's either going to amplify or it's going to cancel out. And you don't have control over that. You just have control over what you put out. And so if you're mindful and put out what needs to be put out, no harm.
Yeah.
The thing with harm is also you can do what you think is absolute best and what you think is going to have the most positive, beautiful impact, and it can still be destructive and harmful. So do your best to do no harm, I guess. It's a difficult line, You might think that I'm going to walk across that grass and it's going to be beautiful, but what destruction are you causing in walking across that grass? So you send out the positive love ripples, you tune into the right wavelength, you tune into the right energy, you send the ripple out, and what's meant to amplify will amplify, and it will get further. What's canceled out that's canceled out there. But in canceling it out, you have interrupted their flow as well.
Yeah.
So effect has happened, change has happened. When the two energies meet, they're both affected. So
yeah. I love that. I mean, it's this fine line between, I mean, like it's surrender really. And, trusting, going back to what we started this conversation with, trusting that larger sentient universe, our place in it, the interconnectedness of all beings, the aliveness of all beings. And I think even just on an intellectual level, I think some people don't even go down this loophole because it's like, well, why? Like, I want to be in control of my mind. And I'm like, you are, but you're also part of something bigger than you.
You don't have control over your mind. You've been manipulated since before you were birthed. You've been completely manipulated. You think you're controlling your mind, but you are subconsciously being controlled all the time.
Right. So like you can bring awareness to different parts of the mind to
direct yourself
and open them.
Yeah.
Funny that you say that too, because in part of my gaslighting story, in seeing, the images on the screen at the laundromat and then wanting to write the story, I had the intention to clear the subconscious. So I was like, okay, like I'm going to write this story to like, work out some stuff that I'm feeling and like the hopelessness and despair that I feel as being like, not even just a number, like a fraction of a number to some of these larger governmental forces and power structures, right? And I was just like, what would make this all stop? So it's like revolution, chaos, cool, but like we need to clear that subconscious to come back to a neutral point. And this is actually something that I want to tackle or explore in another speculative novella that I'm working on. I just finished one called High Voltage, and it really is a cosmic shit show. I mean, I started with the intention of exploring what I thought were connections and what happens among people when connections break down, but it's really about connections within ecosystems. I have aliens as characters. I have Guachipan, who are like these interdimensional time traveling things, kind of like Sasquatch. There are ghosts, there are witches, there are humans. And Earth is at the point where it's dead. It's not supporting human civilization anymore. And this is just the cascade falling, breaking down of human civilization. And then where I'm going to go with it is Earth is then inhabited by dogs, and dogs become like the front and center dominant civilization. One of the characters is a witch, and she sets into motion the series of events that like eventually like will cause Earth to be vacated, and only some people will be able to go to the moon, where there is a new settlement, a resettlement. But then when this witch gets to the moon, she's like, hang on, this is jacked, man. Like the cosmic council like set into motion, you know, the destruction of the world. And this is also reflective of my cosmology, that worlds are always being created, always being destroyed, lifetime after lifetime, this endless cycle of life. And this was just a blip on one of those creation destruction cycles. But then this witch goes, wait a minute, like I want to wipe the subconscious, like so that we don't just get another planet and resettle it and like turn out all the same problems that we wound up having. And so she embarks on a generation ship. And in sci-fi, generation ships are used to advance narratives, or to, you know, because you're traveling for a long time, long distance, if you want to stay with the material paradigm. So the idea is that you have generations of people on a ship, and maybe if it's got to go to like another galaxy or something, it's going to take light years. And so there's generations of people who live or born on the ship. So the witch gets on, she's a time traveling witch, but she gets on this generational ship, and she's going to have a meeting with the cosmic council around Saturn. Saturn to me, you know, I dabble in the evolutionary astrology paradigm. Saturn to me is time, but it's linear time. It's structure, it's boundaries of self, it's form in a way. I have started to use this idea, this concept of moon time, where we speak in cycles and we speak in events, or the cycles of lifetimes. And so you're not measured by hard and fast point A to point B time. You're measured by how many lifetimes did it take you to get to this point where you could let this pattern go or break this karma. So that's what the moon colony represents. It's a matriarchal society that the witch is reconstructing on the moon. But she's going, so essentially the moon time, the idea of time as cyclical, is going to have a conversation with linear time, as in like one after the other, like things have to happen. And she is going to ask, why can we erase some karma, some programming? Can we maybe change the way a world works? I don't know what I'm going to find, but I trust that whatever, you know, the universe is like, yo, write this. And I'm like, okay, like, I trust that whatever I explore through that will be fruitful and worthy of my time and my effort. I don't know where that's going to go, but I also think it's like, it's way more interesting to me to spend time exploring some of these questions than to just sit back and consume mass media and just like,
oh, finish it.
This is the part where I like thinking. Like I like
Yes.
thinking creatively. If someone, were to meet me or like ask me what my legacy would be, I'd be like, creative thinker. I used to think that my legacy would be a writer, but I'm like, no, in the conventional or mainstream jargon or implementation of the word, I'm not a writer because I don't crank stuff out like a machine. Like I'm a writer because I just like channel and pull out of the ether and use words as my medium, which is where I think I feel more aligned with being called an artist than I do with a writer. But then it's like, oh, well, what does it look like? What does your art look like? I'm like, oh, well, read a story, or like, good luck with this like pile of words, like have an experience. Here you go,
Labels. What are we doing?
Labels.
Why are we putting labels on things? Why are you not just Anastasia? I always say, whenever anybody like tries to label or tries to like analyze or tries to like pin me down, I'm just an Ezerd. I'm just an Ezerd. But I think that part of, to take your story and twist it into, because that's a lot of stuff that we need here. I think that a main point is we need to have a universal, deep understanding of trauma. We need to understand all the different layers. It's not just your trauma. It's not just your family trauma. It's not just your community trauma. It's not just the generational trauma. It's the planet trauma. It's beyond the planet trauma into the larger scape. And all those layers and levels, all those energy fields that we were talking about, we're all interacting together and it's all influencing each other. And so if we start to think and understand, have deep compassion, deep kindness, and shine through love, work through love, there's always going to be people who are fighting that. There's always going to be people who are not understanding or running into conflict with those things, because it takes a lot of energy and power and patience and drive to get through all those things. But if it's something that's built into the system, it can flow so much more beautiful. I mean, that's a judgment call. I don't like to do judgments, but there would be a lot less suffering.
No, I agree. And I think that's also, this isn't me speaking, this is the work. I think that's why meta work was just like, no, put me out, do the thing, do it. Because like when you're working from a trauma mind, you are working with a heightened sensory awareness. You're working with disconnected memory or memory lapses. You're working with like kind of low-key gaps in time. And so when I wrote the book or I assembled it, like there's a chapter where I'm 10, and then there's a chapter when I'm 30, and then there's a chapter when I'm 20, and then I ended it with a chapter when I'm 60. Like I'm not 60 yet, but like what I wanted to emulate or simulate were these like stop gaps, these like fractured experiences of time and memory. And I was working with a woman named Gila Green, and she was teaching a writing workshop, an autofiction workshop, and she wound up reviewing meta work, and she saw some of it in earlier versions, and there were a few chapters where I'm just like, all right, I'm fucking off, I'm going to New York, I'm alone, I'm by myself. And her response or one of her questions was, why wouldn't your parents check in on you? And why wouldn't, why? Like basically why to a lot of the stuff that I wrote. And I'm like, well, my mom had just, like my mom has lived with a lot of mental illness that kept her in a trauma state and acting a certain way. And then there was this real, like, I don't know, my dad just had stuff going on, and there was a lot of inflexibility or lack of empathy. Like he had a very black and white way of viewing the world. And so that equals like, you know, me acting out as a brat, being like, fuck off and doing my own thing. And then my dad being like, whatever, I don't want to deal with you. And my mom just being not responsive or not, you know, like kind of out of the picture. And I didn't want to write that into a scene because I thought that it took away some of that charge and it took away some of that firsthand direct experience. And so now what I'm asking you to do when you read meta work is like, I'm asking you to drop right in, because as I perceived that scene and that happening, not explaining, oh, mom, this, mom, that. I'm like, no, she acted this way. She said this and dad did this, full stop. Like, I want people to be able to have that experience of what it's like to be in that disordered mind so that they can say, oh, shit. Because once you start using mainstream language, I mean, once you start using the more common established idioms and conversation and currency, then you kind of start to get away from actually being in that experience, and you get to be in the experience of a rational mind. And all of my work, hands down, is a takedown of the exceptionalism of a rational mind, one that can reason, can think, can, you know, be logical, can come in and out of, you know, like mental states, can have consistent cognitive function. Like, that's all jam. That's just not how it works all the time, right? So I hope that people come away with compassion and empathy for anyone dealing with any kind of mental situation. And like, look, like, I'm not about to like rationalize, well, you know, like hearing voices or like having hallucinations, or like, I'm not here to put a value judgment on it, whether it's good or bad. I'm also not here to romanticize the experience, because no, you don't need to have some sort of a mental illness to be an artist or to be in touch with your artistic impulse. That's some bullshit. Like, explode that myth. But it is hard as heck to have agency and to have that volition. And when there are days when you're like, oh, I got shit to do, oh, I just can't do it. And over time, that affects you in so many ways. And then that affects your resources, that affects your self-worth, that affects everything. So that's where I wanted to go with meta work. And at that core level, offer direct experience for something that, like, I don't wish on anybody, but also, since it was my own experience, like, here you go, here it is, visceral. And like, I know no different. And I worked hard to be in a better or right relationship to it, so that I could have, you know, like, my mind is its own mind. It has its own world. But then another part of that is meaningfully channeling the creative impulse in addition to some of that fractured experience. And that is where I think, like, the power, or where I really start to step into full power, because like, that's some hard bullshit to do. And like, I did it. So, okay, buy my book and read about it. And like, that's my offering to the world.
It's acceptance. It's this is what it is. We're going to just move forward with what we have and what's going on and whatever happens, versus like, let's sit down and think about it. Let's really analyze this. Anybody who looks at it and wants to question anything about it, it's because they're coming from their own level of understanding, their own perspectives. They're putting all of their own analysis into it. And so then they question it, but it's not the true account. It's not the true thing. And what are they doing within their own lives? They're running the same programs you ran. Maybe
Right.
not the same
So
exact levels, maybe not the same tweaking of the knobs, but
yeah.
But if you're reading the aftermath of it, you have that moment, because you're not in that moment to reflect, and you have that moment to analyze, and you have that moment to question, you know. So what you've done is beautiful and perfect in its entirety, from start to finish. Beautiful and perfect, whatever it is that comes through you. Accept and keep going.
And hopefully disrupt the system, disrupt some of these like really calcified subconscious thought forms, like garbage, gotta go, next, clear it out.
My art too, like anything that comes through, oh yeah, I did it, it's done, there we go, and here you go. Yeah, unless it's really like screwed up, like a I break it. I have done that. I've broken something. I'm like, oh, but like,
How do you break? How? What?
like, things happen. I accept it and I move on. No, but like whatever comes through comes through. And like sometimes I'll look at something, I'll be like, that happened. All right. And then I'll show it and someone's like, mine. And other times I'll be like, I love this one. Oh my God, this one's amazing. And then it'll sit there with me for a long time and no one wants it. Okay. I have no control over that. I have control over this came out of me. This is what I'm going to show you because I'm confident that it came through for a reason. When I did the adopt a robots, that was like the best. That was like the best because I'm like, robots. Good luck to you finding a home there, buddy. Look, and sometimes they'd be gone like instantly. That'd be like the first thing that sells at the event I'm at, you know. And then other times, like I'd have one that'd like hang around for years, and I'd be like, this poor buddy, I'm just gonna have to give this one away. And then finally its person shows up, its being shows up. I'm gonna say person because I don't know who these beings are that come to my table. I'm not gonna assume that they're human. They're just beings that show up at my table. And then that's the one. That's the one. And like, all right, that one's been waiting a long time. Where you been? Come on now. So whatever comes out of you, whatever comes through you, that's perfect. That's beautiful. Just go with it. You know, unless you are like harming, we'll go back to the harm. Unless you're harming, it's perfect and it's beautiful. Let it happen. Accept it.
Yeah, you know, like harm is an interesting word in itself. I can think of another piece that I did, series of pieces that actually came out of the pandemic. I did Bayush. I created this character who ultimately like eats. Bayush is not nice. Bayush is this like little spirit that came out of the earth when earth exploded. And when earth exploded, Bayush the spirit took a woman who happened to be sitting in New York, grabbed the woman and fused her to the spirit to a floating celestial object. We'll call it like an asteroid. So Bayush is like a sentient asteroid with like a half human stone woman, kind of like Lady Liberty. Like Bayush is like this stone character with a crown and has this domain of ancient New York City that is floating in perpetuity throughout space because Earth has exploded and like now there's just like this thing and like Bayush births babies and again, look, I had a thing with like the drunkenness, like one of Bayush's, you know, this image of like 45 comes barreling through space and it's like crying little baby with like tiny hands and like the orange hair and like face and like Bayush eats them and then like births it out the belly and kicks it back out. Like, there you go to have another lifetime, fucked it up. Bayush has a black hole in the back of her throat. So she eats that. And if the soul makes it through, then, or if the soul doesn't get stuck, then it has to go back out and have another lifetime. If it gets consumed by the black hole, it's good. So the idea that like, and the Bayush is like going at him, like eating him, ripping him, like tendon for tendon, like blood is dripping, like that's kind of harmful, but it also expresses this like rage that I had watching the drunkenness. Granted, he's a figurehead, or he was a figurehead, but he's just like this ugly, malevolent character causing so much harm that I wanted his harm to stop. So I wrote a character and I ate him. What?
There's 2 points there. It's harm in some cultural ideas, but other cultural ideas to be eaten like that is actually to nourish another.
Right.
So it's not necessarily, it's a cultural idea of that's harmful and bad. And I just lost the other one.
Harm is a loaded subject.
Harm is a totally loaded. You could think you're doing like the most wonderful thing for someone and it's actually doing harm. You could
Yeah.
be like actually harming someone, and it could change their life in a way that totally makes things click into place and turns it beautiful. I think that should not give you license to go out there and just be brutal. I mean, violence, even noble violence, is still violence. That's the thing. If you have a murderer in a room and somebody murders the murderer, you still have a murderer in the room.
You still have a murder. You've got two in the room.
Well, the one's dead now, but yeah, but like noble violence is still violence.
Yeah.
What is your intention, and why would you want to take that into your being and into your energy system to solve someone else's energy? So you're not solving someone else's energy system. You're disrupting your own. And so I think that harm is a difficult thing.
Yeah,
Violence
but yeah,
is a difficult, like
and
all that. But if you look at nature though, if you look out at the beautiful garden, you're like, oh, such a luscious, beautiful garden. On so many other levels, there's violence happening all the time. You have this thing eating that thing. You have this vine curling around it, choking the life out of this other thing. There's so much layering and dimension to the idea of harm. And so if you're not out there being like, yeah, I'm going to hurt somebody today, like if you're trying to move through love and you're trying to project through love and use energy in a loving way, yes, you can still be doing harm, but the intention behind it is not a harmful intention. But
I wonder,
again, like violence is like a frightening thing. Like yeah. But there's an argument if you can't have the one without the other as well. So, I mean,
I see what you're saying. And, as you're talking, I'm thinking maybe this is why I like to write characters that aren't human as a way of like displacing
robots.
some of the, right? Like, oh, but like leave it up to the gods, or like leave it up to like beings beyond me because they're violent. I don't want it. But then again, like one of the characters in High Voltage, the speculative fiction, is microplastic. And microplastic that has assumed the field of all, imagine, like all the trauma, all the intrapsychic garbage, everything that's in the plane, in our subconscious. Imagine what happens when there's nobody there to be a person to like fulfill it. It's just kind of there. So microplastic in the story is one of the main villains because it is the transmitter. It's the field for all this disembodied, like subconscious bullshit. And it's doing harm, but it knows no different. And it doesn't want to die. It doesn't want to go anywhere because that's what it's, like its existence is other people's trauma. But one of the reasons that Earth has to burn down is because that microplastic is holding so much energy. It's created this atmosphere where like you're just always going to be stuck in the 7th level of hell, never changing, because that's by nature what it is. So it makes me, now that you're saying this, I'm like, this is probably why I always go to non-human characters, because like I got a whole lot of rage and harm and like violence that I need to work out in a generative manner. Because to say that this doesn't exist is also to be like, come on now, that's not a real philosophy to have. Like you have to acknowledge where the balance comes in and what your role and what your part in upholding or knocking out the balance is.
You have to accept that part of yourself as well. Totally. That part's in you.
Yeah.
You have to sit with it. You have to understand it. That doesn't mean you have to enact those things that might run through you, but you have to look at them to better
Which is
know
why
yourself.
it's a great way to run them out, or like even in in my new writing workshops, this is what I'm going to offer, like this is your one chance to like be the douche, be the asshole, be mean on paper, have that tangible experience, and then let it go. Because something is there working itself out through you. Let it go. The tangibility of pen to paper, or like, oh my God, that's such a geezer expression, of writing it out on your laptop, you know, just having that experience.
Popping into
Taking a
your
form.
whatever the text to voice to
Right.
text.
Like, man.
When we all get the Neuralink, because they're slowly making computers harder and harder to use, like it just doesn't seem to like they're pushing you into the Neuralink is what they're doing. You wait. No, but like it's all coming from an us versus them and a non-acceptance of whatever that is. Whatever you point to as that, whatever you put that label on, and you're not accepting of it.
Yeah.
That's the conflict that bubbles up and boils over. They like that's prevalent in all of the levels, everywhere you go, from any little within yourself, within any of your relationships, within the society, you know, community, society, everything. It's all taken to an us versus them situation.
Yeah. Which is kind of the nature of our universe in this dual nature experience.
Is it? Or is it what we've been given? We've been force fed.
Oh. I'm gonna go with because we're working it out, and then once we work it out, we go back to that big blob of white, pure, unified light, or whatever it is. But it's
rainbow.
Of course, which is white light contained and then split as a rainbow. I mean, it's everything is just in motion. Like it's, you know, in one form or in a different form. Things are the same and they change motion. They change into something different, but of the same essence or the same form, I think.
And the light shines in the dark.
Yeah. And light shines in the dark.
The light in the dark.
Very true.
Oh man, what? We could go on for hours.
I know.
This is gonna be little segments.
Like if I can
part
learn.
73. What are you naming the series?
Episode 2004, timeline 30 AD. Oh, I just put us back in time. We go back.
I do that all the time.